Welcome to the second program in the Towns of the County series. This is co-sponsored by the Rushka Memorial Library and the Butler County Historical Society. So in 1873, the early settlers of Butler County wisely voted that the county seat should be centrally located, and David City was born. If not for the towns of Butler County, David City would not exist. That is why we are celebrating the county seat's 150th anniversary with these programs about the 12 incorporated towns of Butler County. It is because of these towns that David City has thrived. The presenters of this series are people who live in and are proud of their towns. We owe them our thanks for creating and presenting these programs. Giving a program isn't easy. We ask that you please hold your questions until the end of their presentation when we will open the floor. And now, let's hear about the history of Dwight. We're proud to introduce to you Mr. John Lavicky.
Well, is that loud enough?
Yeah.
I don't know why they had me do this, but I am the oldest person in Dwight. And they felt sorry for this old guy. I was born on a farm over at Garrison, Nebraska. We left the farm in 1936. I was about to be I graduated from kindergarten at the Kennedy School in Garrison. We moved to Dwight, Nebraska. In 1937, I watched them put the water tower up in Dwight, put in the city waterworks. That's how young I am. I'll be 91 years old in June. I also am a veteran of the Army, spent time in Korea, Japan, the Aleutian Islands, and no other place was the best place was Butler County. But in Butler County, I knew just about every person in David City, Surprise, Ulysses, Brainerd, Bruno, Abbey, Linwood. I knew them all. I also knew everybody in Seward County. I used to get around a lot. I never stayed home.
Before you were married or after?
Before I was married, I was around a lot. Well, my wife Dorothy is here, but now I have to take her along, and she does a good job. Getting back to old age. It's not that much of a big deal. It's just a high number. If you like high numbers, well, you get one every day when you get old. The thing is, never look back. Somebody might be chasing you. Those are words of Satchel Paige. My favorite speaker that ever was a Bishop Fulton J. Sheen. Have anybody knew who Fulton J. Sheen was? He was the main man on television for many, many years. I've got several books on him. And I try to do the things that he tells us to do and the things not to do. But the main thing in life is don't bitch about everything. Have a good time, because the next day might be your last, or today. Have a good outlook on life, and don't tell everybody what hurts. The old saying is, how you feeling, John? Well, I says, everything I woke up this morning, everything hurt. And what doesn't hurt doesn't work. And that is true. I survived the COVID. I spent 8 weeks in Lincoln Brand Hospital. I'm one of the survivors. I am very, very lucky and happy that the good Lord spared me. My good friend, Reverend Sidlick from Dwight, and I were there at the same time, and he didn't make it. And those were the days that you remember the things that you should have done in your lifetime and you forgot to do them. Pray. The main thing in life is think of the Lord. There is somebody watching over you every day, no matter what you're doing. But don't bitch about life. Have a good time. As we get into some of these, already got passed by dues. Okay, great. These two people here, J.P. Dunlap and his wife Christy, they are the founders of Dwight. They had the 70 acres on the south side of Dwight on Highway 66. That 70 acres was given to Dwight to the railroad, and then on the north 80 was given to him by Shelby Davis. Those two gentlemen started the Dwight Townships. This Christina Dunlap was born in Scotland, and so was Dunlap. They had 6 kids. The Dunlap's Grove at Dwight is still on the highway. Roger Rada now owns the property. And in that property, all those trees and all the trees that were in Butler County and around Dwight and Ulysses were planted by this man. He planted trees from here to Ashland to Nebraska City. He was a great friend of Sterling Martin. He knew all about horticulture, strawberries, the Dunlap apple. If you ever heard of that, it's still in existence in Washington. His wife was just a young girl, and she went to visit her sister over at Donovan, Nebraska, and with her sister and 2 brothers, and they were captured by the Indians. They were in the Indian reservation for 4 months before they were released. Then they got married. She was 19, and then he was 24. Mr. Dunlap is buried at the Dwight Union Cemetery, 1 mile from the Dwight Big Cemetery, 1 mile west. That's where Dunlap is buried. His wife, Christina, is buried in Donovan, Nebraska, with some of her children. One of her child is buried in the cemetery, in the trees on the east edge of that lagoon there in Dwight, when a rattlesnake bit a child, and he buried her right there. When the railroad come through there was nothing here, I guess, in those days. Well, I'm told that this man here he used to walk all the way to Ashland to sharpen his plowshares. He cut railroad ties for the Union Pacific Railroad for years. And he had a real extraordinary with the James brothers. He himself used to cut ties. He was a surveyor. He brought a man over there by the name of Richardson, who became the surveyor also with him. And the Richardson was the town where Dwight is at. That's Richardson Township, named after him. Richardson also built a house here in David City, where Dr. Rudolph used to live in it. I guess it's still standing today. This is part of Dunlap's relation. J.P. Dunlap and Palmer Dunlap and his son Nelson. They were at Dwight in 1986, and they were on our celebration there. This was taken in 1988 or so, and they were from out of state. Those are the last surviving people of the Dunlaps that started the town of Dwight was Shelby Davis. There you are, Richardson, Bill Richardson, pioneer settler in Nebraska, and he was a county surveyor, named township after him. He's buried at the David City Cemetery. Laying a cornerstone of the first Dwight Assumption Church in 1914. That's the present cornerstone that we have for the yellow brick building now. Silver Jubilee in Dwight back in 1921. All these people, old people from the Old Testament, there was Father Monsignor Nimitz, Father Pazori, Klein, Monsignor Klein, and there was Nimitz and Crank and Powell's and Dufex and the Hudavies, and you name it. These were the guys that started the church over in Dwight. And the St. Mary's School in Dwight is still there. It's not a school anymore. It was built in 1921. It was copied after the one built in Duncan, Nebraska. The same person built the one in Duncan, built the one in Dwight, Nebraska. They closed the school in 1961 for high school. That's when they joined joined Aquinas. And that school sat empty for about 18 years. Then during the Vietnam War, Vietnamese families moved in there with a Catholic priest and several other doctors. They lived in that school for 8 years. And the bishop had control of that school. When the Vietnamese moved into Lincoln, the bishop had an empty schoolhouse. Dwight wanted to buy the school, and the bishop would not sell it to the village of Dwight. But the local man that went to school in Dwight Assumption was an alumnus there, Mr. Leonard Benish, graduated in 46. He bought the building from the bishop for $10,000. He then in turn gave the $10,000 gift to the city of Dwight, who applied for a $350,000 grant from the federal government to put in Dwight Apartments. And they are now Dwight Apartments ever since that day. They're on the first floor. The top floor is storage. The bottom floor is storage. But the middle floor is 5 units in there, all electric, beautiful inside. And if it wasn't been for Mr. Leonard Benish, we and Dwight all know what he did for the community. This is a grotto, part of it that was made by Father Bauer to come to Dwight in 1931. By the way, he baptized me in 1932. And he left in 43. Father Bauer started the Assumption Grottos. And that grotto there is the grotto of the fellow from Bruno, Mr. Hussig. That was in memory of his passing. Well, this is something that 1948 we had a pretty good basketball team, yeah. Left to right, Francis Novacek, student manager, Edwin Hudeby, myself, Francis Sorion, Charles Novacek, Gilbert Kobzo, Valerian Zide, Richard Hudeby, Julius Hudeby, and Coach Father Clarence Reisdorf. That was in 1948. And here's the old public school, taken in 1975, just before it was demolished. This school started way before Dwight Assumption did. And it started in 1885, and it went to 1953. When they closed the high school and they had to go to Brainerd High School. You know, some of the grammar rule people there, Fred Hudeby, Jake Hudeby, Francis Hewitt, all kinds of names that are associated with some of the people in David City. Here's the Richardson Schoolhouse. That's the Richardson, the surveyor. He built that schoolhouse east of Dwight, 2.5 miles east. It is still standing today, and it's added on another house to it. It's a beautiful place. There's people living there with a family. And this is some of the old timers that attended that reunion in that Richardson Schoolhouse. They were from around the Saunders County and Dwight. Okay, here's the old Chicago Northwestern Railroad located court. Those are the people that lived in that place, and their husband, he was a track inspector and a gandy dancer by the name of Adolph Mary and Ed Lishka. And they lived in that. Incidentally, I'll get back to that. That house burned down in 1911 with the big fire in Dwight. Here's the president of Chicago Northwestern Depot, built in 1887. It's still looking like that today. It's on the National Register. And the owners are Roger and Russell Novacek. So they take care of that building. It's got a lot of memory in there. There's a lot of tic tac in there. All the ticker tape and all the schedules going in from, and that building is the oldest building in Dwight built. And the town of Dwight lost the railroad in 1962, and a construction company out of Fremont picked up the ties and rails, and that was the end of the line in Dwight. Incidentally, this depot is the only depot standing today on the line from Superior, Nebraska to Fremont. There is no depot on a railroad track at the present. The nice Snyder Fowler Company that was right across the street from the depot. That's what it looked like in 1910. That was before the 1911 fire. Updike Grain, that's another big elevator. It was in Dwight. You know, Updike Grain sold coal to all these towns from Linwood, Abbey, Bruno, Brainerd, Dwight. All those towns do not have natural gas. The reason they don't have natural gas, this outfit was selling coal in all those towns with those elevators. That's how, and we did not get natural gas. In 1936, we could have natural gas from Ulysses for $1,800. And the town board outvoted it and voted it down. And they all have natural gas, but Dwight does not. There's John Lishka, 1983. In front of the building now, it's called Pardo-Novacek Brothers Elevator. He was employed by Nye Snyder Jenks and Fowler Company in Lumber. And that was there back in the early days, right before the big fire. There's Dr. Joe Serve, 1918. Originally, he was from Dodge, Nebraska. He had two brothers that were surgeons on a great university, and they practiced in Omaha. He had a brother that was a senator, served out of the Clarkson area, and that's our Dr. Joe Serve. He married a Shabbat girl, Agnes Shabbat, World War I vet. Here's the interior of the Dwight Bank, taken in 1920s. It still looks pretty decent in there today. It's now a public library. The Dwight State Bank, taken sometime between 1903 and the big fire, 1911. That building is still there. It's still standing. It's now the public library. Current building now used to be a bank also. It was there for about 5 years, and now it's closed. And it belongs to the Neiman family. Dobrowski's Flour Mill. Roller Mill, that was just east of the Dwight Co-op elevator. And they had a sign there, 5 gallons of gasoline for $1. The story is on page 66, we'll get to that. And here's something, I didn't know that, I'm just a young kid. 1917, when Prohibition came to Dwight, the last carload of beer that came into Dwight was 1917, before Prohibition. Dwight at that time had 3 great big beer joints. 3 big beer joints, and they had 3 Voss ice houses in the alleys. Ice houses all over town. But the beer always came to Dwight. It never failed. Here's a saloon that also was in the middle of the street where Sides Cafe is now. And that burned in 1911. And that building was demolished. And so that brick building was built there after that. So that was the first building on right north of the bank. Here's a saloon again in Dwight. They had a lot of them. East side across from the from the bank on a corner, yep. People them days, they just cared, they had salutes, okay. All right, now here's a carrot, this is Ted Divish. Ted Divish is a World War II veteran in the Navy. He was at Pearl Harbor when his ship was hit, the USS Reed. Ted Divish was there when all that Japanese bombs and all that went off. And Ted moved back to Dwight after the war. And the USS Reed, they got enough steam to go out to sea. They transferred Ted to another subtender. When that ship got out to sea, 2 weeks later it was torpedoed with 300 men on board and died. And Ted was one of the 15 that survived that Holocaust, and he was not on that ship at the time. That's Ted Divish on the West Bar. The West Bar is still there. It's called Check It In, yeah. Douglas Chicken Hardware Store. Well, every town had a hardware store like that, yep. Sold everything from porta potties and everything else. Baby buggies on top, so they sold everything in those days. This is the old Dwight Assumption Parish Hall that made for many, many years. And it caved in on that back day when Larry Aldridge and his wife had their 25th anniversary. During a rainstorm, everybody got out just in time. And across the street is a brick building. That was a big building built after the 1911 fire. So is this building here built after the 1911 fire. And that held a grocery store and a movie theater at one time. Either one of them are gone. They're both gone. Right now is a David City Park. I'm in Dwight Park now. They got a nice one there. Well, this is the old bank building, and it still looks good today. It's now the library, the public library. It used to hold the post office at the same time. Right here was a Louis Kohler filling station. Underground tanks in those days, that's what they had. And they had Ethel. Remember Ethel? They didn't have, what they call it Ethel. Well, we're getting back to, well, that's the same building. Okay, here's a first fire hall that was built decent. It was built in 1954. And since then, they built another one much newer. There's the corner bar now, it's called Bevo's. That bar there that burned in 1911, that burned to the ground too. Everything on Main Street from the south to the north burned, except the brick buildings. Today that belongs to the people doing tear-off. Okay, here's the original Science Cafe before it burned in later years. That also was a mortuary for Dushik. That was an undertaker. He had a mortuary embalming service down below in the basement. On the right side was a grocery store, and that's why my mother and dad bought that store out in 1937. And they run until 1949. And over here you got Shunka's Hardware Store, Heinz Appliance at one time, Womansville Garage, Chevrolet, and Buick. And that building is still standing. That also burned in 1911. Now here is the building that never burned. This is the hotel built by Louis Wirt, and renovated by the Collister family, Floyd Edwards' family, 35, 40 years ago. And it's got 11 rooms upstairs. Each room is heated electrically. It's all electric heat. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. Collister, the ex-patrolman, bought it Him and his wife Trish, they live in it. Here is the building that was built after 1911 fire, right on the corner. And that was Kabila and Kamari. They built that. And then Kabila decided he moved over to Brainerd. The meat market. The meat market's still there to this day. It's all reconditioned, refixed. When we moved off the farm back in those dirty 30s, we lived in there for 1 year. There was a heating place in there, stoves. Now, CJ Boats rebuilt the whole inside of that building. It used to be a meat market, then a laundromat. It also was a cafe at one time, and a lot of every other thing. The Lot 6 elevator, that's the elevator that was built in 1950 when it was struck by lightning and burned to the ground. And they got it running for wheat harvest. So that's still standing today. It's owned by Roger and Russell Gavacek. Here's the corner building, the corner bar. And that's an old history of that. That's where Ted Jeeves had that bar. Right across the road, that's where the laundromat is now. And that building is empty. It's chock full of stuff from a guy from Ulysses has got storage in there. By the name of Berkel owns it. The electricity is cut off of there, so there's no chance of fire. Now here is one of the oldest buildings in Dwight. It's still standing today. A fellow by the name of Frank Novak lived in it. He raised 3 sons and 2 daughters. The 3 sons become priests. One become a bishop in Brazil. One daughter become a nun. That was one of the oldest houses that was built in 1912. Our first fire department rescue squad, 1965. Incidentally, that black Chrysler car was bought from a mortician at Minden. And the mortician bought it from the outfit out of Colorado where General Eisenhower vacationed, and he had that car to drive around Colorado. Dwight since then sold that for big money. Okay, here, 1911, you can see what the fire did at Dwight. It took half the town out. Yep. One of the elevators is still standing. There's a couple homes back there still standing. 1911. And they're starting to rebuild a little bit at a time. It don't look like anything. Okay, here's some of the old, right? Those towns in those days, baseball was a summer thing for baseball. Everybody had good baseball teams in those days. Dwight had them too. Dwight had many, many good baseball teams. But they had 2 men that went to the major leagues. And Lishka sitting in the middle with the bats right across him. He was a pitcher. He graduated from Dwight Public High School. And at 19 years of age, he pitched ball for Dwight against everybody. And he ended up at the Washington Senators, Philadelphia Phillies. He pitched against Lou Gehrig. He pitched against Babe Ruth. He never said how far Babe Ruth hit the ball, though. And another fellow right next to him, top, second from left, Butch Ernie Crank. He was one of the 3 youngsters that started the fire in Dwight in 1911. He was 7 years old with his brother. They were 8 and 9. They started the fire in a little bit of a barn behind the Legion Hall, playing cowboys and Indians. And the fellow next to him is a by the name of John Shunka. He would have been in the major leagues too. He was a catcher for the Dwight Town team. They played a baseball game at Beaver Crossing. As he was catching a guy, swung at the ball and missed it. He come around to bat, hit him in the back of the head and killed him. That's John Shunka. In front, we've got Charlie Lavicky, Dale to the left. We've got Leo Hudley. And we've got George Gudlicek, Adolf Turda. The Turdas had a grocery store, a barber shop, and a Willis Light and Ford garage where the sofa mechanic shop is now. And some of the people from down below that helped Dwight play baseball. Okay, I come back from service in '55. We started the Dwight Town team. Some of those you may know. Emil Shishina Jr., myself, second from the left. Gilbert Kobza, Hank Kobza, right there.
Oh, wow.
Ben Prohaska, right there. And Dudley Lavicky, my umpire. Front row was Alfred Lavicky, Marvin Zedek, Bobby Nall, Kenny Zedek, and Donnie Nall. And Herb Suhart way on the end, but he's not listed there. We got into Legion Baseball in 1964. That was one of our teams I had. And we had some pretty nice baseball teams back in those days. Okay, this was taken in '71, old timers of baseball, and this was in the Parish Hall. Snippy Liska, right there, second from the left, on the bottom row. But the guy on the left, he's from David City, Stanley Sofel. The guy had Sofel and Burkle. Stan Sofel had two sons, Norm Sofel and another boy. They were good athletes. Their dad was a good athlete. He comes from Dwight. Then also, it goes up right there.
This one?
Yep. And Bill goes up. Back row, George Gerska. Joe Prenosa right next to him. Leo Hudley and Adolf Hudley. Frank Ike Craig, Charles Curtis Lomacek, and Johnny Boland from Ulysses. George Gerska taken in 1935 but trying out with the St. Louis Cardinals. The Lubbock ball players, left to right, Jerry, Ernie, Clarence, and Ernie Jr., taken in '59. Their dad started the American Legion baseball program in Dwight in 1959, and I helped him for that first year until he had a heart attack. And from then on, I took it over for about 14 years. Incidentally, the boy in the middle is Clarence Novak. He's a Vietnam casualty, killed in Vietnam. The first Butler County casualty in Vietnam. Clarence Novak, the boy in the middle. All right, this is about 1913. This was a Corpus Christi procession. They used to have them processions in all these towns. Dwight used to have a great big one, so there it is. That's the old bank building there. There's a big empty spot between where Science Cafe is not there yet. There's a beer joint there, you can see it way on the corner. The Dwight Parish Hall is way to your right on top. And this hall here burned down again in '38. That was a gymnasium for the ZCBJ. But Bevo's Tavern is still there, Wobbsville's Garage is still there. Well, that's the first waterworks in Dwight. And that day they took a vote for anyone in favor of a water system. Shortly after the vote was taken, tar appeared on the street. Finally, the waterworks were put in 1938. Incidentally, in the 1930s, they voted liquor by the drink on the first ballot. Waterworks took 6 ballots before they got waterworks. That's a true story. My dad told that to me. Here's one of the most prominent Hudleys in Dwight. They come from the old Leopold Hudley. Yep. Leopold Hudley. there was the Viscardias, and there was the Toads, and there was Adolf Hudeby, Leo Hudeby, John E. Hudeby from Ulysses, there was the Stronskys, there was the Chishidas, there was the Chussidys. And he had one daughter that was born, and they buried her at the first Catholic cemetery in Dwight. The first burial was his daughter. And that's how we got that cemetery at the corner of 66 in Dwight. Now here's another prominent family, the Meixners. Every one of them become a doctor, lawyer, or an Indian chief, one or the other. 2 of them are lawyers, 2 of them are dentists, 3 of them are surgeons. And the daughters all were high-educated ladies, and they lived in a 2-room school, little house right across the street from where the parish hall is now. They moved up to our neighbors and they lived in that. And so then they were great musicians. They all knew how to play music. Well, here's Irving Novak. That's the old man standing by one of his buggies. Back in 1957 or 58, I restored both of those buggies for him and his boy. And they had them done for the Dwight Festival. Beer judging contest, that was Dwight Festival times 2. The bottom picture to your right, Frank Boomerl, Cy Nimitz in the middle, and Ed Muntulak on the right side. On the front, there's a whole bunch of different people. Yep. These are some of our men that died during the service. Namely, the Porter brothers are both buried at the Union Cemetery. They both died within a week of each other with influenza in 1918. Joe Navarro from Loma was buried in Loma. And Emil Polisky from Dwight was killed in Europe. Eddie Kohut was killed in Korea. Ernie Dolajov between Dwight and Bringer was killed in Korea. And of course, Clarence Novak killed in Vietnam. And Joe Honig was there. Okay, here we go. This happened in 1951. I was a year out of high school. See the guys on top of the beer joint? I was one of them, but
best thing in the house.
there's Ernie Coleman sitting in a car driven by a guy from David City, Denby Horacek. Joe Proska is visible there, Frank Kennedy, John Novacek. And there's next car you'll see another one there, but that's Ernie Coleman. And that day they estimated 1,500 people or so were in Dwight. It happened in June. It was a beautiful day. This was on the platform. Monsignor Klein was there. Dignitaries from the government, state office, whatever. That was on the. There's more guys on the beer joint again. See them? At that time, Dwight didn't have a legion post. Everything had to be conducted on the David City, Sword, and Bringer. And Valparaiso didn't have a legion post at that time either. But all them people were there, and they, at that day, at the parish hall, they served 1,700 meals in one afternoon. Chicken dinners. Or Jimmy Coma, that's her brother, and Tony Coma. And Tony Coma's wife from San Diego, California. Ray Cecil, right here on the right in the front. Incidentally, Tony Coma had the second nation's highest award, the Navy Cross. He got it in Saipan. And all those people were standing around it. Most of them had hats on. Remember how people wore hats in those days? And nobody wore overalls. Just look at them. All dressed up in suits. They tried to get an army tank to cross from Valparaiso to Dwight, but the bridges wouldn't hold us, so they brought this half-track in. That was in a parade. Members of this band were mostly from Brainerd. And Dwight, Urban Civic is visible there, and the Sedlock brothers, and there's Leon Novak, and there's Eldon Dufek, yep. And all the dignitaries in the back, they were on that stage. That's still on the stage, yeah. Mr. and Mrs. Coma are way in the back. Here is Ernie Coma. He spent 22 days in Korea, and they sent him home wounded. That's when he got the Congressional Medal of Honor. Killed approximately 250 North Koreans off of his army tank. President Kennedy greeted him and Dwight. Not in Dwight, at the White House. That was probably in 1960, before he was assassinated, yeah. There's James Coma, his younger brother. Him and a guy by the name of Frank Belsham joined the Merchant Marines in 1942. They took Merchant Marine training in Massachusetts and Connecticut. They got on a Liberty ship. One was full of dynamite, gasoline, and they were out at sea 3.5 miles, and they were torpedoed by a German submarine. It blew the place up, and him and Belsham lived through it. And it was supposed to go to Southampton, England, and that one never made it. He got on the second one a week later, and that was torpedoed. He got on the third one 3 weeks later after that, and that was torpedoed by the German submarines, which were thick in the Atlantic Ocean. He didn't join the Navy. He got tired of that. He joined the Navy. He retired as a postmaster in Louisville, Nebraska. He's buried at Louisville, Nebraska. He's the third one of the Coma boys. That's my cousin Dan Lavicky, working on some kind of a big engine, yep. That was during the Vietnam conflict. Well, that's me. That's when I was young. Here's one of our favorite Legionnaires that was from Ulysses, Richard Morovitz, yep. Another one, Milo Navratio from B. Yep. Of course, Cy Nevis. Yep. Cy's Cafe. Remember Bob Polanski? He was not a Legion member. He played at the Legion Club 4 times a year. Christmas, Czech Festival, Veterans Day, Armed Forces Day, him and his band. We consider him a Legionnaire, and he lost his life in 1998. Bob Polanski. This is a Legion band that Bob took us over to the cemetery. He started that Legion band for our colors and the rifle squad. And that was led by Bob Polanski. He started that for us. Well, there's myself and Leanne DeSoulful, my brother-in-law. We're marching into the cemetery and Dwight. And behind there is Dwayne Rick, I believe.
I remember that. Well, you have any?
You can open it up for questions.
Yep, questions.
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Am I boring you?
No.
I hope so.
He's got a list.
What?
That list.
Oh, I can do it now.
Yep.
Getting back to business places still in Dwight, Nebraska. All small towns gain and lose a few people. Dwight has lost some and gained some, but we still have some prominent business places in Dwight. The Assumption Church, Parish Hall, and the Grottos. The old Assumption School converted into 5 apartments. Zapka Purdue Mortuary. Dwight Fire and Rescue Squad. The Dwight Community Library. The American Legion Post 110 Auxiliary Unit 110 and the Sons of the American Legion. Size Cafe, incidentally, 62 years in business, the oldest business. Size Cafe of 62 years, continues in the name of Size Cafe, run by Sharon and Gwen. The Nimitz girls run the cafe.
Janet.
And Janet. United States Post Office, People's Tavern, Jim Service, Jim Musling, and Richard's Repair, International Repair, Right Away Drain Cleaning, Todd Wright and Son Wilson. If your sore backs up, that's the guy that blows the thing out. Paul's Plumbing, he does a little bit of firework. Paul DeWitt. Express Lawn Care, AJ and Valeria Williams. East Butler Elementary School, preschool, 5th grade before and after. Farmers Frontier Co-op. Randy D's Expression Beauty Shop, D. Comenda. Green Line Equipment, Tom Thram. Berkshire Hathaway Real Estate Agent, Austin Terrell. CJ Boats Construction. Aaron Kennedy Construction. Beanie Electric, Dustin Beanie. Evergreen Apartments, 4 apartments in the Evergreen. And the Dwight Hotel called the Domoff, home of Dave and Trish Collister. Any questions on anything?
Yes, Uncle John, you might explain how you met your bride, who's my aunt, and how that connects you to almost all of Butler County?
Well, I come home from service and her brother married my cousin, Dolores Lavicky from Seward. And we stood up for the wedding. I never knew who that gal was. And now we were married in 1957, so what, 65 years? Long enough. Long enough. You know, you talk about the world infection, all that's going on, Russia's all this and that. And if Russia attacked Turkey from the rear tomorrow, would Greece help?
All right. I know. Change that. You're gonna have to clean it up.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay.
John. So Dwight was started by Scottish people?
Yeah.
Okay, then how'd all the Czechs take over?
The Czechs took over, the first guy come over there was a soulful and a cello pick. And they come from the old country. They started out in Weston, then they went to Plassey. And they were the first Czechs in Dwight, a soulful and a cello pick. And they were related to the Navratios from Holland. They're all related, yep. Then comes the free land that was given to all the Czechs, they all come over there between Abby, Bruno, Dwight, B, Weston. That's where a lot of the Czechs come over within 3 years. Boy, everybody's quiet.
Any other questions? I don't know about you, but I thought that was a pretty darn good program.
Oh, yeah.
It's a huge honor to sit and listen to people like Bob last time and John tell us about history. This is a big deal. So, So I have just a few things to say at the end. I want to thank John for the wonderful program. And of course, I don't have it in my hand, but in my bag is a certificate behind you, Greg. Is a certificate we want to give John, just appreciation of thanks, and give you a 2-year membership to the Butler County Historical Society. It's nothing compared to what you've done for us and for the county, and obviously he's been a major leader in his town. We also want to thank the library for supplying the water. They always supply water. Jackie Mashek
Take a picture with that.
baking, baking all those collages. She donates those guys, so don't be afraid to tip her. Steve Burley and Mark Doling for filming, Greg Fiala for running the slideshow, Judy Davis and Richard Polacek for manning the calendar sales. Don't forget we have some calendars back there and postcards now. And of course, mostly we thank you guys for all coming out. Thank you for supporting History of Butler County. Now, next month's program is about Ulysses history. And Greg, stand up. This is the guy that's going to be giving the presentation for them. Back in October, we set the dates for all of the presentations, and just recently, I mean, just like this weekend, we changed the date. So it is not on March 6th. We apologize for that. I know it was in the paper, I know it's in the calendar, but it is going to be March 13th. So we do have a sign-up sheet in the back, and if you want to sign up and just put it on your calendars. So the more we know that is coming is how we decide where we're going to put this event. If there's only 50 people coming, we'll have it at the library. If there's 75 people, we'll probably have it at Winfield. But when we have 100 or over like we do today, we need to be here. So we can't make those decisions until we know. So please sign up. Thanks for coming. Have another collage and come talk to John. He did a great job. Thank you.